The morning is clear and cold. They put on every piece of clothing they had. They strapped oxygen tanks on their back. They roped themselves together and off they set at 6:30 in the morning. They were just 400 metres below the summit, but in that high, thin air, every step is hard. They took deep breaths, they cut the last steps, and there they are at the top. It was 11:30 on Friday the 29th of May 1953. Human beings had finally reached the top of Mount Everest. I was around 3 years old when he climbed Mount Everest, so for us as young New Zealanders growing up, he was without doubt the greatest living New Zealander, and he continued with that reputation throughout his life. So my impressions were really formed by the tremendous impact that epic event of climbing Everest had on New Zealand. It made us feel so proud that someone from our country had been the first to set foot on the highest peak on earth. I felt honoured to be asked to be patron of the Trust because I've known of its good works, I've known obviously of its association with Ed Hillary. I'm also an outdoors person, I'm a trekker, I've done a little bit of high altitude climbing, and it seemed to me that it brought together a lot of my interests across the natural heritage and social policy issues. What has been different about this for me has been that we are moving through living communities. I sometimes think of it as like the root burn, but with people. In our wild and natural areas, we haven't had habitation through the centuries. Thank you. But the people here who've come over from Tibet in the last 600 years or so and have brought with them a rich cultural tradition from there continue that in this region and these villages today. The whole building has been built through cooperation of local communities, school management committee, Himalayan Trust Nepal and Khumbu Pasang Lamu Rural Municipality. Successful through the financial support of Sir Edmund Hillary Stiftung, Germany, Mrs. Ingrid Versen, Chairwoman, Hausa Excursionen International, Munich, Germany, Greater Himalayas Foundation, Dr. Pasang Yangji Sherpa and local community, inaugurated by me. I think you need to come to the Solukhumbu region to appreciate how profound the influence of Sir Ed and the Himalayan Trust and its volunteers and supporters have been. And it's such a remarkable association because it comes from this magnificent feat of conquering Everest far, far away from New Zealand. And then the interest continuing. And because Ed was an inspirational figure, not only in New Zealand, but the United States, Canada, Australia, Britain, there's been efforts in his name in this area of Nepal for decades now.
Helen, after she retired from the United Nations, the Trust wrote to her and said, "We would like you to be our patron." And she gladly said, "Yes, I'd love to be your patron." Then we said, "Well, look, we know you're a mountaineer and a trekker. We'd love to organise a trek that we could do for you and accompany you into the area where Ed worked." And she said, "Yes, I would love to do that."
Do you know which one's Everest?
No, which one is it?
It's the, see the one furthest at the back?
Yeah.
It's got a little
Puff
puff cloud on top of it. And the piece which Ed and Tenzing completed, which nobody else had done, is the bit that is in the cloud.
It's just about revealing itself there, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so where did Ed go up?
Absolutely along the skyline.
And who's the statue of?
Tenzing.
Tenzing. Lovely.
But I think his message is very important. The message at the bottom: do not climb.
It would have been so easy for Ed just to walk away and say, "I've done Everest, now I'll try something else." And of course he had other adventures, but he kept coming back here and he wanted to do something with and for the people. And when I say with, he always wanted to respond to what their needs and requests were. And their priorities were very much their health and their education and their water. Namaste. Namaste.
Very good. Bravo, bravo.
They look very good.
Very
Rongo.
When will these be planted out? When I first came here in 1964, it was obvious that there was a lot of forest reduction, that trees were being chopped down a lot, and they were being chopped down for firewood, they were being chopped down for construction, and there was no replanting of trees, and natural regeneration is very slow. And Ed realised that if there was some sort of replanting program, it might be possible for better forest growth to occur into the future. So the replanting plus the establishment of a national park have been responsible in a complete change, a very striking change in the forest environment throughout the whole Sagarmatha Mount Everest area.
My father and my mother and all their friends could see that all the trees were being cut down, and it was getting worse and worse as more people came to the area. So the need for preservation of all the plants was really necessary. So my mother came up with the idea of having a park, and of course there's a whole lot of work that was done to establish the park, and a great deal of funding had to be done, and they got a lot of help from the New Zealand government.
Okay, they're ready to, about 3 years they will, at 3 years she's saying they will plant them out.
Yeah.
Right. It's cost effective to plant the trees directly into the mountainside and not worry about trying to fence them. The restoration of forest in the area does a whole lot of things. I mean, it encourages wildlife, it reduces the rate of erosion, and it retains water, all of which, particularly the latter, is an important thing to do in today's climate change world.
Well, yes, and as you're walking along the trails up there now, you can see the most extraordinary sights of people carrying unbelievable loads, both so clumsy and so heavy. And there was one there, we saw this cable going in for a bridge which had about 20 people sort of spread out along the length of this, all carrying it. There's no legal limit, there are some sort of human limits, I suppose, but basically the standard load is about 30 kilos. But if you can carry 60 or 100, then you'll get paid a whole lot of extra money for it because it is so heavy and awkward.
A great metropolis awaits us in Kundi.
There's the hospital. See the long building with the white roof
At the back?
Yes.
Yeah.
And this big white slip coming off the mountain is a small dam burst which happened a few years ago.
Yeah.
And there you can just see the Gompa with the red roof out to the right and out to the left out there, and it's quite a new Gompa. Got badly shaken to bits in the earthquake and has been now rebuilt.
When you're travelling through the Khumbu, the news goes ahead. People from the Himalayan Trust are showing up, and it is a famous organisation up there simply because it is associated with the name of Ed Hillary, the Barasab. So you are really just going along in the slipstream of Edmund Hillary. So it does have this wonderful feeling that a red carpet is being unrolled in front of you.
You look very well. Come along, La.
Namaste. Hi, how are you? Hello.
The Kumjung Monastery is an old monastery, perhaps a couple of 100 years old, something like that, but it has one piece of fame that tourists know about, and there is a so-called Yeti scalp in it.
I was here in 1961 with Sir Ed on a Yeti hunting expedition, and we couldn't find anything up in the mountains, but the one thing we found, we came to this monastery, and they said, we have a Yeti scalp here. And so, of course, Ed said, we must see the scalp, and they brought it out, and here it is. And Ed looked at it, and it is a funny looking, it has one feels there is almost a line of stitches along the top of it. But Ed said, would you let me take this out to a scientist in Chicago who would examine it and tell us exactly what this is? And they said, yes, but there is one condition. You must build a school here because we have no schools. And Ed said, I will build you a school. And they gave him the scalp, and he found it was made from a mountain goat. But it is used in many, many religious ceremonies. So it is, in fact, a religious artifact with many myths attached to it.
Before Ed Hillary came back to the region, children didn't get to school. And so those schools opening made a fundamental change.
When I was here, I was a teacher of English in this school, and I'm probably, in fact, the oldest surviving teacher of Kumjung School.
When I lived here and Diane was teaching here from 1966-68, this was the only part of the school, this aluminium building. Now the whole place has expanded hugely because so many village children come here. The kids are all wearing uniforms now, and in our day, and the kids wore homespun clothing, and if they had shoes, they were homemade shoes. They weren't shoes that you buy in a bazaar. So it's different. It's very different.
And do the children, they learn to read in both of these scripts?
Yeah, they learn the three script: Sherpa script, Nepali, and English.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Now, of course, Kumjung School too only goes to a certain level. And then the difference that the Himalayan Trust has made is to invest in scholarships for children to complete their secondary education
English.
in Kathmandu, and then from there to go into higher education.
What other things are you thinking that you might do?
I want to be nurse in the future.
You want to be a nurse? What about you?
I want to be a teacher in my future.
Fantastic. Good.
I want to be a doctor.
You want to be a doctor, and you were the announcer in the hall, weren't you?
Yes.
Very good. Well, you could have a future in radio and also. And what about
For
you?
me to see, I want to be also doctor.
Doctor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to be a nurse.
A nurse?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm interested in air hostess.
An air hostess?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I want to be a nurse.
Nurse?
Yeah. I want to be a teacher.
Teacher?
I wanted to be a social worker, CTO.
Social worker? Oh, okay.
So we have spoken to people who got their primary education, people who got their secondary education, people who got to then train as a community medical assistant and come back and help in the clinics or in the hospital, or people who got to do their university degrees and have a full qualification. So this has just been transformational for the people of the region.
Well, I was just saying that she is, singing his praises and thanking him profusely, and to Helen that one absolute notable feature of the patients here is they're exceedingly grateful. They just, they appreciate everything that can be done, is done for them.
What was the diagnosis?
Well, the lady, 82-year-old lady from Kumjung.
So she's walked all the way up here?
All the way from Kumjung, and she has been suffering from diarrhea.
The hospital happened because Ed had been in this area at one time when there was a smallpox epidemic, and he saw people dying of smallpox, and he was aware that people were not healthy in the area. Ed's initiative allowed young medicos from New Zealand to work and to actually help the local people. And further, you now have Sherpa doctors running this hospital to a very high standard, and those are people who went through the Hillary School training system. When we came to Nepal, we walked into what was essentially a medieval environment with modern medical help, and that it was very rewarding to work in that environment.
Because yes, the results were almost instantaneous, so therefore totally satisfying.
Here it was very obvious the need for good public health.
It's hard to separate education and health because one reinforces the other. The two together have had an incredible impact. And then if you have those foundations of human development, education and health, then you have the opportunity to fulfill your potential for income and economic opportunity. And from what I can see, the Sherpa communities have just grabbed those opportunities and run with them. Well, there couldn't be a more appropriate place because down below, the first school Sir Edmund built, the first hospital he built, and to have Sir Edmund and Lady Hilary and Belinda all remembered looking over that is incredible.
When you climb into the Khumbu, you go past Namche Bazaar and into Kundi Komchung and the other high villages, and suddenly you are surrounded by these absolutely startling mountains. And there's an inner ring of them, and beyond that you see Everest, this huge wall filling the valley. But the nearby ones are lower but very spectacular. And Ed and his expeditions made the first ascents of those Khumbu mountains. Well, in 1989, this monastery burnt to the ground in the middle of the night, and although a few people managed to arrive and get a few things out of the monastery, that was it. And Ed always told how when he heard about that, he went to Kathmandu and he got into a helicopter and came up, and he described how he put his arms around this old monk who just wept. But he was also there with his American friend Dick Blum, and they went out and they raised money. They raised it, must have been close to $500,000, and they rebuilt it.
One of the early projects Ed took on at Kunde was getting clean water supply down from the water source to the village. So important for health and sanitation. So that work, which began in the early years of Ed's charitable involvement in the region, continues to this day. And on this trip, we're part of a new opening of yet another project.
Well, this is the village of Mushe, where the Trust, in conjunction with the Village Water Committee, has built a water system which involves using local spring sources up on the hillsides, bring it all together into a big reservoir, and then from there just pipes run down to every house in the village, and there's a fire hydrant system in case there's a fire.
So our plaque reads, "Clean water for healthy Mushi." The community would heartily like to thank all the generous donors for supporting the drinking water project. And it was officially inaugurated today by me, Helen Clark, and the chairman, well, the vice chair, Tashi. You get the good jobs. So we declare it officially open, inaugurated. Thank you.
Thank you.
3 years ago, there was a serious house fire in Lukla, and a bunch of houses burnt, and there was absolutely no form of firefighting whatsoever available at that time. And it was only good luck that managed to stop more houses being destroyed. But as a result of that, there was a decision made to plan a water hydrant system similar to at Lukla, similar to what we've seen demonstrated here today.
Oh, well, it's very exciting to be putting out a fire with the new fire hydrant system, and we hope that it'll be extremely useful for the inhabitants of this village.
Namaste and good morning, everybody. And thank you for the wonderful welcome to the school here and for all the explanations about the damage that was done to the school during the terrible earthquake of 2015. We know that it was Sir Edmund Hillary who came here and supported building the very first school, a primary school. But when a big earthquake comes, those old buildings don't always stand up. So here is an opportunity to rebuild the school for the 21st century. I am the patron of the New Zealand Himalayan Trust, and I'm very proud that the Trust supported the rebuild of the buildings which we have just inspected and cut the ribbons on.
The legacy that Ed Hillary has left in the Solukhumbu region of Nepal is so large. Really, Ed and then Ed sort of folding into the Himalayan Trust have really changed the lives of people for the better forever.